Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. My name is Mr. Aegis, and I will be your host for the Knowledge Fellowship Seminar Series number 7. Can you believe it? We're already at our 7th episode, our 7th instance of the Knowledge Fellowship Seminar Series, where we take some of the fantastic educational streamers in the Knowledge Fellowship, and we give them a little platform, and we highlight them, and we show all of you all the great stuff that they're doing. And hello, Albel156. Hello, Waterspace Dom. Hello, Matt M33. Claire Burr, first-time chatter. E to the 2I Pie, thank you so much for being here and helping out. Cranberry Banana Salad, saw you yesterday. Great to see you again. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I'm so glad to have you here so that we can highlight all the great educational stuff happening in the Knowledge Fellowship. And I will bring on our guest momentarily, but hello, Nogra Zero. Fantastic. Claire Burr, you haven't seen a proper TKF stream. Well, this is really the first ongoing initiative that we have where we're streaming live to this channel. We have so many great streamers in the stream team, and we wanted to make use of this channel to bring them on and highlight them like we're going to do tonight. With all of those fantastic streamers that you see in that slideshow playing right now to my right, your left. Actual Education, fantastic. Actual Education, I'm looking forward to having you on this little series as well soon. Cast the Dreamer, hello, welcome. Let me know if I seem a little too quiet or if the music seems a little too quiet, whatever. You know how that goes for a streamer. Having to log out of all of my accounts and log into this account, that can be a real pain in the butt. But yeah, I'm about to bring on Melissa in denial. But first, like I said, I just want to highlight all of the great stuff happening in the Knowledge Fellowship itself. If you are not already following the Knowledge Fellowship channel right here, please go ahead and do so. And check out the stream team in the About section of so many of these great streamers like Melissa in Denial. There is always someone in this group streaming something that is educational, informative, something that is a little bit better than, let's say, all of the slop that's out there. Because there's a lot of stuff that you could be watching, but you're here tonight watching this, watching what's going to be a fantastic educational discussion with a great educational streamer. If you're interested in programming, in math, in history, science, however that song goes in The Big Bang Theory, you know how it goes. Any of those subjects, there's someone streaming something like that right now. But don't go switch to those. Watch this for now. So without further ado, let me play a little intro video for our next guest so you know what you're about to see.
Hi, and welcome to Melissa in Denial. I'm Melissa, and I'm in denial in more ways than one. I am an Egyptologist, archaeologist, museum educator, and educational content creator. I've excavated archaeological sites all over the world and worked in museums throughout the United States. I founded Melissa in Denial in 2020 during a pandemic, and it has become my personal goal to teach as many people as I will reach, all about ancient Egyptian art, history, and archaeology. Now that I have completed little wee Egyptologist Melissa's childhood dreams by going to Egypt, I want to share that with you. I want you to feel the love and passion that I have for this topic throughout my videos, my streams, or my courses. So you can check me out on TikTok, Twitch, or Patreon. Come along with me to discover the wonders of ancient Egypt. Hi.
Absolutely. That is 100% the reason why I wanted to have Melissa in Denial on this channel. And there we are. Hello, welcome,
Hello.
Melissa. Thank you so much for being here with us. This is not the first time that we have chatted, but go ahead and give yourself a little bit of an introduction to the viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope let me know if everyone can hear me. As we all know, Melissa doesn't know how to do audio, and we've rigged it in a very weird way. If you're on my channel, go over to TKF, and if you can't hear, I'll just lay that out there right now because I have rigged this a very strange way. But welcome everyone. My name is Melissa in Denial. I am in denial in more ways than one. I am an Egyptologist archaeologist, and I stream Egyptology archaeology games on Twitch, as well as making short form content on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all the other things. I also do guest lectures as well. So Mr. Aegis was my last guest lecture from season 3 of my guest lecture series, and we're about to start season 4 in 1 month. So We do a lot of fun things, playing history-themed games and doing discussions and lectures and such.
Yeah, it is great to see you again. Great to have another chance to talk with you. Last time you and I talked about nutrition and supplementation in ancient Egypt, which was a very interesting conversation. Some interesting
Yes,
parallels to modern age.
absolutely. It's
But
very
we're gonna,
weird. A lot of weird,
yeah,
fun things that we talked about. I think that was one of my favorite lectures because I learned genuinely so much from all your knowledge of supplements and such. And I was like, maybe I should not be taking these.
yeah, some things, it's just hype, right? But that's just how it goes. But
Yeah.
since this is more of a broad interview, we're going to start this off more like it would be like a late night talk show. So why don't I dig a little bit first into your background? How did you decide you wanted to be an Egyptologist or study history, study ancient Egypt?
I like to say that I had a very long and winding road to kind of get to where I am today. I always say that the beginnings of Egyptology started when I was very, very young. And my mom gifting me the Magic Treehouse book, Mummies in the Morning, which is, I think, the third book of the Magic Treehouse series. And it came with a companion book that Mary Pope Osborne would occasionally write a nonfiction book about that topic. And so I got both of them. And so I got the really cute, um, the really cute, like, funny story about them exploring the pyramid, and then I get the actual facts next to it, which was great to kind of see that juxtaposition because I always loved reading fiction, especially historical fiction. Um, and it had always fascinated me as a culture that seemed so different than my own. And I think that was what really drew me in. And then as more I've studied and looked at it, I have realized that they're very similar to us. They're very similar in a lot of different ways. But I really, funny enough, did not go to school to study Egyptology, to study archaeology, or really anything. The joke that I always say is that archaeology was my backup job, which for most archaeologists, that is actually hysterical because it is a very low paying job in general. But I really planned to go to school for creative writing, which is something that I admired and loved and did all throughout my childhood, mainly because I read so many books. And as soon as I started taking anthropology classes, because of course I didn't pick a good school for archaeology, I picked a school that just had it in addition to what I wanted to do with creative writing. And as soon as I started taking those anthropology classes and those archaeology classes, it quickly flipped. I suddenly was like, wait a second, this is a field that exists. You can technically do this. Like, you can actually go and continue to learn more about the past, either by actually digging it or reading or translating or any of these things. And I was like, wait, this is really cool. This is what I want to do. I've always just like sought knowledge of the past and always trying to imagine what they did in the past. And unfortunately, I kind of came to this realization probably too late in my undergraduate and was like, well, I could leave. I could go find a better school. But I had already made so many friends, and everything else about the school was literally perfect for me. And so I didn't really want to leave. And so then I went out and studied abroad, and specifically went to an institute that had like very intense archaeology classes, which like threw me in to both doing the actual coursework and classes. It was the first time I was able to touch ancient Egyptian artifacts, and then actually go out and excavate, and then immediately continue like 2 weeks later to go and do my field school outside of Rome. And when I came back, it was just kind of the way, I guess you go to grad school. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's where we're going. And didn't really think about it much. And that unfortunately led me down the other path where I was very happy to go and get my master's in Egyptian art and archaeology. Realized about halfway through that I went too specific and I should have gone to public history or museum education or public archaeology, because I did not want to go the typical academic route and I did not want to get a PhD and teach in universities. It was sort of this realization that I wanted to have a 9 to 5. and I did not want to have to go home and start grading papers. And I was like, ooh, that's not going to happen if I become a professor, especially because like you still have to make the classes. Like you have to figure out all those things. I was just like, oh my gosh, that just sounds like not the teaching that I wanted to do. And I was very lucky that I took some internships with the current job that I have as a museum educator at an archaeology museum, and was like, wow, I could stay here for the rest of my life, even if it has nothing to do with Egypt. But then COVID hits. I graduate in COVID. It was a blessing and a curse, obviously for a lot of reasons, but for me personally, it enabled me to finish my thesis relatively unscathed because I'm stuck in my apartment for 2 months. And it also gave me that opportunity after I moved back home. What am I going to do with this Egyptology knowledge that I have? And knowing that I don't think I'm going to be able to get a job in Egyptology with just a master's. And I'm not going to get a job in Egyptology doing what I actually want to do, because I'm not going to want to teach. I don't sort of have the qualifications to be like a curator or anything like higher in that museum level. And so I was like, I guess we'll just start writing blogs and writing Instagram posts, which is what Melissa in Denial started as. And that was 5-6 years ago. And it is now stemmed into so many different avenues that I can't even count with what I do on every different platform.
So that really leads us right up to you deciding to do streaming, right? Because that's sort of the natural extension, as especially during and after COVID, with the explosion of live streaming content, and in a good way, educational content as well. What was the origin of that like? What was your first initial sort of live streaming experience like?
So I started Melissa in Denial in September of 2020, and I was teaching an online course. So I knew that I wanted to try live streaming, but I kind of told myself I should probably wait after I finish this course to start the live streaming. So I didn't start live streaming until the end of November 2020. And if I remember correctly, my first ever stream was going through an Assassin's Creed Origins discovery tour. So it's not the actual game, it's just the tour that gets you to sort of be able to look at all of the different sites that are in the game without like hyenas chasing you or Romans trying to murder you. And I remember that I was very grateful because I didn't even know about Twitch probably until like late 2020, because a friend of mine from college started streaming and playing games for herself. And when I saw the success that she had very quickly on, I was like, well, I could try that. And I had bought the Assassin's Creed Origins game for really cheap. I think I bought it for $11 off of some weird sale, but I didn't have a computer that could run it. Like I had a laptop. And so I had bought it maybe a year before. I probably bought it before COVID. And I was like, well, I know I'm going to enjoy this game because it's about ancient Egypt. Other people probably want to see an expert do it. So let's just play it. But I had never played a game like that before in my life. Like genuinely. I was an Animal Crossing Sims player before that. That was the only video games pretty much I ever had played. And so it was a huge, huge learning curve. But I think that's what made it so entertaining and interesting, is that I was going to get eaten by a crocodile or stampeded by a hippo, and then the next second I'm suddenly seeing a Fayum mummy mask that I actually recognize as a real mummy mask that's at a museum close to me. And I was like, oh my god, I know this mask. And like showing people like all of those the inaccuracies and accuracies of the game, and that is kind of where it all started.
And I do have to agree, people love seeing that kind of stuff. They love seeing first timers do things. So especially when they get something that they're not expecting, which is education on ancient Egypt. But more specifically, ancient Egypt is a pretty huge concept. It's a pretty broad range of years. So is there a particular range that you are more interested in?
My audio, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Oh, is this my headphones? This might be my headphones.
Testing. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog.
It's my headphones. Give me 2
Okay,
seconds.
sure.
Okay, now I can hear you. My headphones just like to sometimes not connect.
Yeah.
I hear it. I hear you now.
So, ancient Egypt, that's a long range of years. That goes for a very long time. So is there a particular era of ancient Egypt that is your specialty or that you are more interested in?
Yes, absolutely. I've had to sort of become a semi-expert of a lot of different topics of things that don't necessarily interest me. Like, I hate to say it, I now know way too much about the pyramids and about Cleopatra VII, which are not totally my huge area of interest. But it is more New Kingdom. And then it is even more tiny is the Amarna period, which is a small 15, 16 year period in the New Kingdom in the 18th dynasty with the father of Tutankhamun. And so I do admit I forget sometimes about how much I know about Tutankhamun itself. And that time period has fascinated me since I was in undergrad, and that was what my senior thesis was on. So I did a lot of research very early on, like that's kind of I think my first research topic I did before I even started my master's. So Amarna has always held a deep place in my heart. The hard part with like Egyptology and a lot of like the history and social sciences is the joke is that you have to dig yourself into a specialty hole. So like you get into the archaeology hole, but then you have to get a time period, and then you have to get maybe even a type of artifact or a type of science. If you're a GPR, you have ground penetrating radar, if you do GIS. And so like I am only halfway down those holes because a lot of times your specialty comes from your PhD. Because I didn't do a PhD, I don't necessarily have that. But with my master's, I do specialize, I guess, in dogs of ancient Egypt, which is what I researched on my topic and collected over 500 depictions of dogs and burials and items associated with ancient Egyptian dogs. And I've been very proud that I've continued that research past when I did my thesis in 2020. And so I've added probably about 40 to 50 dogs since I finished the thesis. And another topic I love is modern Egyptomania. That has always been a huge fascination of mine, and just how modern peoples have interpreted Egypt, how they have created their own decorative arts. A lot of it is decorative arts, so jewelry and architecture and furniture and like very random objects that have this Egypt inspiration, however accurate or inaccurate it is. And that has always been a big fascination of mine. And so I've been doing a lot of debunking of some of this Egyptomania lately, because there are a lot of, I don't know, tropes or statements that get thrown around the internet that are not accurate.
Yeah, I would say, speaking of both of those things, the huge range of what ancient Egypt means and, Egyptomania, when people sort of assume that you know everything about every period of ancient Egypt, that's because, I mean, there's what, 3,000 years worth of ancient Egypt history. We think of
there's like four, honestly.
4,000 years.
If you include the pre-dynastic period, you're getting to like 5,000 to 4,000 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
one of the things that makes me feel like, oh, I must be pretty smart, I have a little bit of trivia, is knowing the thing like, we're as ancient from Cleopatra as Cleopatra was to whatever period. So people will, I mean, assume ancient Egypt means like, oh, ancient Rome. I mean, ancient Rome was around for a very long time too, but not even remotely like ancient Egypt.
Not even close. Yeah, it is daunting in a lot of ways, because the joke I have is that my entire persona, I guess, or username is literally I'm in denial, because of it was a joke that I made in grad school when I started the original Melissa in Denial blog was a blog about a grad student studying to be an Egyptologist, and about genuinely the amount of imposter syndrome that I had during grad school and how much I still have now. Like, it is sort of this kind of trauma that has carried with me of like, somebody will ask me about a really random pharaoh from like the first intermediate period, and I'm like, I don't know who that is. I got to go Google it. And it's just like, I feel bad, and it makes me feel bad. It makes me feel very inadequate that I don't know this exact person. Or I have a lot of people actually who they use ancient Egyptian words like in their sentences or something. Like I've seen a person who I can't even remember what the word was, but it's the word for incense or something. And so they're like, have you ever heard of, I don't know, Shedu? He's like, have you ever heard of somebody recreating Shedu? And I'm like, you got to tell me what Shedu is. Like, I know a little bit of Middle Egyptian. I don't know this off the top of my head. And it's so interesting how I've noticed people like integrating some of these words into it. And I'm just like, you got to give me some background for this, because I feel bad, because I just like, I gotta go Google it first. Like I'm usually that person who has to, I'll Google it first, and then I'm like, oh, the answer was right there. Why didn't they just Google it? And then I forget it's because people see me as an expert and they would rather me give the answer than go to Google, even though I might just be transferring the Google information to them.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're talking about language over the course of thousands of years. That's not even going to necessarily be the same thing, I would imagine.
No. I know Middle Egyptian, which is the language that, for the most part, Egyptologists kind of start learning, because it's not only the easiest one to learn, it's the most consistent one. It also is the one that lasts sort of the longest in ancient Egyptian. I always call them dialects, and dialects is not really the right word, because they don't necessarily all exist at the same time, if that makes sense. Like dialects can exist all in a similar location. Like this is sort of the different transitions of this language. And Middle Egyptian is only spoken and used for a little bit of time, but then it becomes the standard literature text. Like that is the only version that they will use almost all the way up until the end of what we consider ancient Egyptian history. So we have so much preserved of all of these stories and these literature pieces and poetry that are all in Middle Egyptian. So that tends to be the one that people learn the most. But there's Old Egyptian, there's Late Egyptian, there's Ptolemaic Egyptian. And then to top it all off, that's just with the monumental hieroglyphs that you guys would recognize. Then there's Demotic, which is or hieratic is a cursive form of those monumental glyphs. And then there's Demotic, which is just a later version of hieratic, which is again a cursive form of those glyphs. So it just like, I only technically took classes for about a year and a half. And it's just like, I only got Middle Egyptian, and I can't even sight read. Like you have to really study for an insane amount of time to be like an ancient Egyptian linguist.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of popular videos that come across my feed now are things like people doing Old English and Old Germanic versions of songs, and be like, how much would you actually recognize if you were to go back 200 years in English? And like, you would barely be able to understand someone who speaks your own language, or a progenitor of your own language a couple generations ago, let alone 4,000 years ago, across dynasties and multiple kingdoms and invasions and movements of people and so on like that. But
it's so confusing and so overwhelming in a lot of ways.
But knowing that there's a lot of literature that is preserved, it sounds like that really interests me, because I like reading old books, even though students will tell me, what do I get out of reading this old novel? It's obsolete. These people aren't relevant anymore. When it's a great insight into what normal people were like back then. Do you get a sense of what an ancient Egyptian, an average normal ancient Egyptian was like during their life?
Absolutely. And the literature stories are very fascinating. And I've talked about this recently a lot, because if you think about like Greek mythology, and you think about like, there's the big stories that involve all the gods, and then there's ones that sometimes involve the gods, like Pygmalion and Galatea. Like there's a couple of these there are again these myths that explain the world around them. Egypt has those, but a lot of them are not necessarily all written down, and they also change kind of over time. And so a lot of these literature stories are interesting to me because they almost never involve any sort of gods. Like they like you don't see sort of in like all those Greek myths, you have the humans interacting with gods all the time. It really does not seem to be like a general concept within ancient Egyptian mythology or literature. But the Egyptians are quite funny. They have ways of like rhyming and doing plays on words in some of the literature, and they have very silly stories. There are some very funny things that kind of get featured in some of the stories. One of my personal favorites is one called The Doomed Prince. And The Doomed Prince is, in the very, very short summary of it, is a prince that when he is born, these women known as the Seven Hathors, who are sort of like these oracles, kind of come up with a prophecy that he is going to either die because of a snake, a crocodile, or a dog. And you can see why I researched this, because this gets included in my thesis because of the dog. And the king is like, whoa, okay, we got to take this boy and like kind of hide him away in the palace. And then one day the boy is sitting on the roof with a servant and he sees a guy with a dog and he goes, what is that? Because you can imagine he's never seen a dog before. And the guy goes, oh, it's a dog. And he goes, I want one of those. And then he goes to the king and the king's like, yeah, give him a dog. Completely like no acknowledgement to this prophecy in which his son might die from a dog. And he has this dog and it is like this loyal companion and he's like his best friend. And at one point he goes on a journey and he decides to kind of leave the palace, and he finds these men that are jumping underneath this tower. And it turns out that there is essentially a princess, and that they've said whichever man is able to jump to her in the top of the tower will marry her. And he actually does it, and they end up getting married. And eventually he tells his wife this prophecy, and she literally looks at him and she goes, you have to kill the dog. And he goes, why would I kill my dog? He's like my best friend. Like, I would never kill my dog. Like, my dog is fine. He's not going to kill me. And she ends up saving him from a snake that was going to kill him in his sleep. And then the saddest part about this story is that we don't have an ending. And it makes it so much mysterious. Like it makes it seem like it's meant to be this way, even though it's literally just the papyrus like crumpled and has not been preserved. But the only part we have at the end of the story is that he is walking with his dog by the river, and the dog looks up at him and speaks and says, I am your fate. And then supposedly, I think, tries to kill him. And then he runs into the river, and that's all we have. And so it's so interesting. And a lot of these literature stories follow a lot of the fables sort of that we kind of see. They usually have some sort of lesson at the end. And they also always have narrators. Like a lot of the stories will start off with somebody is telling somebody else this story. And there's actually full grammatical like tenses and stuff that help you with this and then and it's how these stories all kind of flow together. But they tell you so much about how they saw the world around them, and honestly they're relatively simple. They're not like hugely complicated, but they do have these kind of fables and fairy tale aspects to them.
And it tells us that they were dog people, which means they couldn't have been too bad. I mean,
they were dog people. I will
what's
fight
the oldest joke we know in history? It was about the dog who walks into the bar and we don't know what it means, which I really want to know what the joke is, but sadly, alas, maybe someday someone will uncover.
Someone someday will know.
A piece of pottery with the rest of the joke.
Subtly, that was the whole reason for starting my thesis, is that I truly believe that ancient Egyptians were dog people, and that our modern notion that they are cat people comes from our modern take and not actually from ancient Egyptians. Because I think we see them as worshiping cat goddesses like Bastet, and then lioness goddesses like Sekhmet. And we as a public have interpreted that as cats are sacred to them, and thus they are cat people. But in my mind, when you say like an animal is sacred to you, it's similar to like Hinduism, where they have a cow is sacred to them, so they don't eat cows. ancient Egyptians did not have that practice. They worshipped a specific cat goddess, because they ritually sacrificed cats for at least a couple hundred years, to make cat mummies to then give ritualistically to those goddesses. And to me, if that meant that cats were sacred to you, that would not have happened. And so it's like, when I look at them personally and I look at all levels of society, like, they are dog people. Absolutely. I will fight it. Anybody can try to challenge me, but I am pretty confident about it.
Yeah, it sounds at least like the common man was a dog person.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean,
I think they just appear so much in these like family scenes and like offering scenes, like sitting under the chair of their owner. And obviously they appear in hunting scenes and such, but like, in comparison, there are very little cats that are kind of seen in that way, when we look at artistic depictions. And dogs, there are over 100 personal names that have been given to dogs, while we only have 2 personal names for cats that have been preserved. And to be honest, the cat ones are really basic and not as interesting as the dog ones.
I think it fits with just cats' personalities too. They act like they should be worshipped, whereas dogs act more like part of the family. So I think
Exactly.
that fits. Yeah,
I think it
and
fits too.
I think it fits the other impressions of peoples in the region. Greek and Roman history seems replete with people writing about their dogs, giving names to dogs, names that we still use today. I think Fido is like a Roman
Yeah,
name, but
I think you're right.
to
Yeah.
make that connection, how much of the region have you had to study or learned about, sort of like their connections with Greek society and their interactions between Egypt and, say, the Levant?
Yeah. Not as much, like, I'll say in schooling we did not do as much, but since then I have had to do a lot of research on some different groups. In grad school we were required to take a Greek art class, as like one of our grad school classes, because of the interactions between the Greek and Roman world. But it wasn't a class about the interactions. It was just a Greek art class. So it didn't have like it. I knew a lot about that stuff already from classes I had taken in undergraduate. But the funny thing about it is, like, when you think of the timeline, like the Greeks don't come really even close to interacting with the Egyptians until at least like sort of the middle of uh of ancient Egyptian history. And it's hard to kind of comprehend sometimes, because Egyptian history just goes so
Yeah,
much
I mean,
longer
the
and it's just
ancient
pushed
Greeks
to the
are
side.
so far away from us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I've done a little bit of research. One thing that I want to do more research on is the associations and the um, interactions with Nubians.
Mm.
So the area south of Egypt called Nubia, which includes multiple different civilizations. The most prominent is the Kushite civilization. The the odd thing about this is that Nubia is more often, even though they are very similar to Egyptians, and both cultures were copying and taking like mythology. So the Egyptians have several gods that probably originated in Nubia, and then they kind of took it as their own. And then Nubians eventually started building mini pyramids for their pharaohs. And so there's this very, very obvious interconnections between them, but they don't often get studied by Egyptology. Egyptology is a very old field, and it unfortunately has limitations that it has kind of set upon itself. And sometimes they don't really expand that. And they don't really allow other people in sometimes. So I ended up like including a couple dogs that were found in Nubia, mainly because I found this amazing study about these buried dogs that were found, and they were found so well preserved that they had fur, and they were actually able to do analysis on their stomach contents, and trying to see if they were ritually killed or if they naturally died. And my professor in grad school was like, "Why are you including this? This is Nubia." And I was like, "Why am I not including it?" And it's very complicated why Nubia is not included, and unfortunately it stems from a lot of racism, unfortunately. And so that is a culture that I want to study into more, because it is so similar, and they used, both sides were friends and foe. It's where almost all of the gold from Egypt comes from. They would trade with, or at one point when they would own it. All of those things, it just has been ignored for a long time by Egyptology, and it's been sort of like, oh well, that's like African studies, and it's like,
Yeah, as if Egypt is not in Africa.
I know. It is unfortunately very deep seated in racism and the way that the world of Egyptology began, and how the field actually began with genuine white Europeans believing that the Egyptians didn't actually do all these things, but it actually was a very early European group that moved down to Egypt and built all these things.
Right. Or ancient aliens, which is a whole other...
Well, I mean, and I'm talking about like this, that is a genuine actual theory that was happening in like the 1700s or something, and then that stems into ancient alien theory as well, because it is all kind of on that basis of racism. But it is complicated and confusing that Nubia does not get included. It's also complicated and confusing that Egyptology ends with ancient Egypt. Egyptology is not the study of Egypt. Egyptology is the study of ancient Egypt. And so people ask me about Coptic history or medieval history or early Islamic history in Egypt, and I'm like, no, like that, unfortunately, that falls into, I don't even know what that honestly falls into. Like if it falls into somebody who's just a medieval, like something studies Islamic history and they study Egyptian Islamic history. Like, I don't know what field those fall under, but ancient Egypt ends. There's not a hard cutoff date. Some people will use the death of Cleopatra VII as a hard cutoff date, but technically a lot of Egyptian culture was still in existence for a couple hundred years during the Roman Empire. And so some people will do it, will cut it off when the Roman Empire converts to Christianity. So that there's no hard cutoff date, which is kind of annoying. But yeah, it's so complicated, and it makes for not great interaction sometimes on social media. In comments, depending on certain videos. And I've had to put up a lot of boundaries of things that I'm just not going to make videos on, because it's not going to be good for my mental health, and it's not going to be good for the health of my commenters, who are all going to be screaming at each other and not being nice to each other. So just gotta set some boundaries in some ways.
Yeah, that's and that it's unfortunate, because one of my favorite things to think about is the interactions between these big cultures, these big civilizations that seem pretty self-contained, but the stories of the ancient Roman legion that maybe had an interaction with ancient Chinese empire. Like, wow, that's fascinating to think about. Wouldn't it be cool to think about all the different peoples that ancient Egyptians might have interacted with or traded with? Yeah. But then that's not something people want to study.
Yeah. One of my favorite cultures besides ancient Egypt is exactly that, is essentially all these cultures that sort of stem in the area of Afghanistan and Iran and India in the era after the death of Alexander the Great. There's Bactria and Sodia, and all of those cultures are so fascinating to me because of that mixing of cultures. It's a giant mixing pot where you have these Hellenistic ideas, you have these things coming from China, you have these motifs coming from India, and it's a super, super fascinating time period that never gets studied, that I literally only know about because a professor of mine in undergraduate was a numismatist, which is somebody who studies ancient coins, and he specifically studies Bactrian coins. And I was like, what the heck is Bactria? Like, it is, nobody knows about it. It's genuinely one of those cultures that never gets taught in schools.
It's another thing that's unfortunate, because that's one of the areas that I am interested in, is the really, really ancient Mesopotamian, going back to Sumer. Like, wouldn't it be cool to know more about that? But, that's never something people are going to teach about in school, even though it's sort of a huge progenitor.
Basics.
Yeah.
You get the basics of the cradle of civilization, and you get all of the things necessary to build a civilization, which also are not like, it's kind of like, in my opinion, an antiquated look of how to judge if somebody is good at building a civilization. Like, it seems kind of pointless in a lot of ways, because there are a lot of really cool cultures that are not considered a civilization, based on, what is it? It's like something like farming, domestication of animals, writing, building permanent housing. Like, it's like there's a weird list that kids are taught, like, kind of in third
Right.
grade or sixth grade.
Some of which really
Typically.
excludes a lot of indigenous Native American, North and South American
Yes.
cultures, like as if, those are not civilizations. Like
Yeah. Like, come on. Obviously they are. It's what is considered a civilization, and do we even need to qualify it as such?
right. I mean, you get some Mesopotamian. Honestly, I got most things that I knew were only because foundations of Abrahamic religions, like
That is
coming
also true.
back from Abraham. And then you realize, well, a lot of the stuff they said is false. It would have been a lot more interesting if you told me the real history. You might have hooked in a lot more people in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as if a lot of the ancient, not ancient, but medieval Catholic scholars, they did a lot of work in preserving a lot of history and studying, but then how much of that is accurately preserved
Or unbiased.
or
which is
unbiased? Yeah.
the bigger problem, I feel like, because they love collecting things, but then they write about stuff that is unfortunately biased, and that's just how they are living their life. Like, in certain ways, I can't blame them, because sometimes at that time people didn't know, like, it's not that they didn't know about bias, but it's sort of that they didn't understand that that's not the best way. Technically, we all still have biases, and that's always hard.
Yeah. I mean, at least they weren't damnatio destroying the history, which
Yes.
unfortunately people did as well, not really understanding the
Unfortunately, yes.
catastrophic damage to human knowledge that induces. But you talked about coins, which leads me to a question of, did ancient Egypt use coins? Did they have a currency system of any kind?
Nope. No coins, no money, until the Persians. When the Persians take over for the first time, or maybe even the second time in the late period, they are the ones that bring coinage into it. They were essentially a bartering system, and it was all based on weights. There are things that are called like deben, which, like, people have sort of interpreted as coins. Like, deben are sort of the weights, but sometimes they are like a set weight of like a metal of some sort, like of deben of copper. It's still not coinage, but it's all based on kind of a weight system. And you, for the most part, you would get paid via grain. As the Romans called it, Egypt is the breadbasket of the Roman Empire, and it was the breadbasket way long before the Roman Empire even existed. And so you would get paid typically in grain, and then you would actually have to take your grain to a brewer and a baker to go make your two standard food groups, which is going to be bread and beer. And that would be sort of the way that you would sustain yourself. And then I think then you can sort of go on trading and bartering depending on kind of at what level you have the ability to.
So not unlike where I am right now in Wisconsin, bread and beer, really the two main food groups, and really you could barter your way through most of life with that.
Yeah. The worst part about the bread is or the beer is that essentially I don't even know like what the full process, or I don't know if we know like what the full process is, but literally it just appears that they would take, like, you'd go to the baker and then you would take like a loaf that's not baked, and then you would just slap it in a jar and pour water over it, and then wait, and that's your beer. Which, like, I know that's how beer is made. I know that is like technically on a very simple level how beer is made. It's just so gross to me to think that,
Yeah,
like,
it's not
I'm
exactly
taking
the
the actual thing.
Reichsbeeren law or whatever German does with. Yeah,
No.
Real Men Grow Beards has a comment that, yes, that would need cheese. I would need cheese if I was
Yeah.
going to continue. Did they have cheese? Did they use dairy
They
products?
supposedly have cheese. I don't know what level of class had cheese. Like, I don't know how accessible it is, but I will say my most successful video ever on TikTok was the discovery of a big ass wheel of cheese in Egypt. I think it was Ptolemaic, so I think it was like much later. But yeah, they found a big thing of cheese on an archaeological site that was still sort of preserved. and everyone was just memeing in the comments, just saying like, "Give me the cheese! I need the cheese!" Like
I need
it
the
was
ancient
so
Egyptian
bad.
cheese.
It was so bad. And then it's like, oh my God, because then we have ancient Egyptian bread, and then we have ancient Egyptian like something like meat, or like everyone was trying to make a sandwich. It was just like, oh my
Yeah,
God,
I
it
was just
was
about
so
to ask about, again, Wisconsin. I was going to ask about burger. Could we have technically, theoretically, if I went back in time, have a ancient Egyptian
yes.
burger?
Yeah. You definitely had beef, like you definitely had beef. Um I don't really know how much, like beef was kind of probably on a higher level than like probably middle class to upper class. But I've never really seen, we don't have a lot of recipes. We don't really have a lot of knowledge of like how they would use this. But it is very, very standard for your list of offerings. So when you're going to the afterlife, when you're going to die, you need everything that you had in the real world, because the afterlife is essentially exactly like the real world, but in the land of the gods, and then you get to live forever. So when you go to the afterlife, the whole reason that tombs are decorated, the whole reason that people leave things in their tombs is so that essentially you can stand up like a zombie, take all your stuff, and go into the afterlife. Like it essentially is, that is what the Egyptians believed it to be. And so some of the very, very standard offerings, you start with bread and beer, and then the next one is fowl and oxen. And some of that is actually, you actually have two different ways that you can have that um as an offering, where you can actually have we call it a victual mummy. So in some cases you will bury a mummy of an animal because like for more ritualistic reasons, to sort of associate with some sort of god. In other ways, they would cook a goose and then mummify it and then wrap it up and then put it in your tomb for you to eat when you get to the afterlife. So I know we have victual goose mummies. I think that there are victual like a leg of a cow. Is a really typical image, is this guy kind of holding like a full
The
leg of a
ancient
cow.
Egyptian MRE.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah,
I mentioned
I've
this.
actually held one. That's one of the objects that I did hold is my one of my cohorts and grad school. We had a victual mummy in our museum, and she had an inn at the local zoo, and so they took it to the zoo to go get X-rayed, and she did her whole thesis about this victual mummy. And it was in the same case as a piece that I was doing a paper on. So I was there to help and measure, because it was a tiny little scribal palette that had 4 different measurements in all of our records. And so I was like, hey, can I come in and actually get measurements on this? And then we were putting the goose back, and they were like, Melissa, do you want to put the goose back? And I'm like, I would love to. And so I got to hold. He actually has a lot of the victual mummies have a perfect coffin that is in the shape of the goose. So like it has like a 2-piece coffin inside, but it's modeled to look like that. Like it's like, think of a turkey. It looks like a cooked Thanksgiving turkey in a way.
And yes, hello, Alex Vixen. Thank you so much for dropping in and spending time with us. I think I mentioned this when we were talking last time about ancient food and supplements, that I grew up lived in a city for a while that claims that we invented the burger. And so there's a giant statue of the guy who they say invented the burger. And he's, this big statue in the middle of the city holding up a burger. And I wrote a paper about what if aliens come down thousands of years from now and dig up this archaeological site and think that we worshipped a burger god, or, this harvest god who brought us the burger, which leads me to the question that I think about every time I talk to someone who studies history is, are there things about ancient history or the area you study, that we've dug up that you think, or turned out to be, is complete misunderstandings of what their culture was, what their society was like, that we just ended up thinking, well, wow, that must mean this, but no, if they were to come back today, they'd be like, what the hell are you talking about?
I do have one. So there is an object that has been found a lot of different sites, and some are in nicer, like they range from like full alabaster. I think Tutankhamun's got like an alabaster one, to the wood. The only way I can describe it, essentially it's like this shape, and then it has this little stand underneath it, and it's pretty tall. Like it'll be sort of about this tall, maybe. It has been described by Egyptologists as a pillow. And I am adamantly against this because it's ridiculous. I am pretty sure that it is more used to hold a head up during the mummification process. Like, it can't be a pillow. I'm like, it's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable, and it seems so weird. And like, you will still see it described as a pillow. Like, people will talk about it on the internet as a pillow. And I don't know what it, like, genuinely, I don't really know what it is. It obviously is something that seemed valuable enough that it is made in both simple wood, but it's also made in like fancy alabaster. I don't get it. I don't get what it is. And then what is even crazier is that when I was in Egypt 2 years ago, I went to the Mummification Museum, which is this really tiny little museum in Luxor. And it has a lot of really cool, like, it's got a lot of standard things that you would see in most Egyptian galleries. But one of the coolest things I saw was there were 2 actual pillows, like linen stuffed pillows. And I was like, they had real pillows. And I was like, it blew my mind because I was just like, wait a second. They actually had real pillows. Like, linen is something that, depending on the tomb and depending on the state of preservation, we have a lot of pieces of linen, but I had never seen anything that was just genuinely a pillow. And so I was like, my dad was like, what are you so excited about? I'm like, it's a pillow. Look at it. A stuffed pillow. And I was just like, and that's the problem. That's the problem, is I don't know if they were ritualistic, because why would it be in the Mummification Museum?
Yeah.
Like, why is it there and not
Or
in
is
a
that
normal
like,
museum?
Nogra, is that like when you go to your grandma's house or whatever, and she's like, no, that towel is only for show. that's just the show soap. You're not supposed to use the fancy soap. That's just, I hate that. Use your stuff.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I saw that, and it opened up a lot of possibilities, and it made me really happy that it seems like that they had comfort. Like, because honestly, this wooden piece does not look comfortable. But then it made me spiral and question why is it at the Mummification Museum? And I honestly think there is just an unfortunate thing that is in every archaeologist and a lot of probably historians' minds, where there's just this little tiny voice in the very, very back of your head of, what if we're wrong? What if we've been wrong about everything? It's just like, it's always there. And that is why you will always hear me say probably, likely, most often. Like, I am the queen of never saying anything exact. Because it's just how archaeology is in a lot of ways, in that it's an executive best guess. It is, we take all the information that we have at this very moment and we make a best guess. And it is, yes, going along the scientific method that a lot of other scientists go to. But the unfortunate thing is that we cannot make an experiment that then somebody can try to replicate. Like, it's just not, we do small scale, we do lots of fun experimental archaeology, and there are certain things that, like, yeah, the making of faience or the making of Roman glass, like those things, the making of Roman concrete, those things can be kind of go in that actual scientific method, but history can't really do that. We can try to see how many people it's going to take us to take that giant limestone block. We're not going to build a whole new pyramid to test it. It's not going to happen.
No.
I
mean, some people would say we can't build them anymore. We don't have that technology anymore. When,
we don't have that technology. I hate them. Those are my least favorite people.
It is fun, though, that, if you read a little bit and you pay attention, you get to learn these things like that make you feel smart. Like I said, like, oh, I know that Cleopatra was as ancient as, whatever, to the pyramids, and thinking, it was actually like skilled laborers and artisans that were building the pyramids. Little things like that make me feel a little bit smarter than the average person. But then again, average person, maybe not the most intelligent. Maybe that's not a big feat for me. But but what about the average Egyptian? The average Egyptian, what was their education or knowledge like, since we're talking about education?
So little. The estimates of literacy in Egypt, have ranged because it ranges depending on time to time, but they never really get higher than 5% of the entire population. And there's not even a lot of evidence that even pharaohs were literate. Like there's not a lot of evidence really that they needed to be, and that they probably could kind of get away with anything. Um, Really, some of the only evidence we have of any type of schooling comes with scribes. Scribes are the only people that they really need to like learn anything. And the funny part about it is that if you can train to be a scribe, it opens the possibilities for jobs. So you'll notice, and Egyptians love to pile on titles and epithets to a person. So you'll notice that like this guy is a scribe, he's also an architect. Like, and the thing is, you sort of realize, oh, he went to learn how to write, and then that lets him have the ability to become an architect. And certain things definitely, certain titles and certain jobs are definitely given by the king and by the pharaoh and the officials, like family members. Family members are going to get like a higher option of being someone very high up in the government. Hemiunu is the architect of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and he's Khufu's half brother. So, like, yeah. So, is that a more official title? Is that just sort of like he actually became a scribe and then actually learned all of this stuff? Or is that he's the half brother of the pharaoh, so he can just get the architect title?
Yeah.
It's
Did he
always a
actually do the
possibility.
architectural work, or was he like
Yeah.
the project head that got listed as the? He's the
Exactly.
executive producer, didn't
He's the
necessarily
executive
direct the movie.
producer who's not doing much. Yeah, exactly. And it's a possibility. We know things like Imhotep, who designed the who is said to be the architect of the Djoser pyramid, which is the first pyramid of Egypt. He does not seem to have any sort of relation to Djoser, so that is like seems much more likely. But with Hemiunu, that's a different. It's like, okay, well, you see, you get the title of vizier, and because you're the half brother or something. But we do have indications of something called the COP, KAP, sort of. And the COP has been described as a palace school. The reason it's never usually associated with pharaohs themselves. It is a typical title of kind of officials. I feel like it probably only occurs later in the New Kingdom. The people that I'm thinking of it at the moment, they're only really New Kingdom. But they're called a child of the COP is literally a title that they get. And even though they're obviously an adult by that point, the COP has been described as a palace school that is meant for either like essentially other dignitaries' children, potentially children of other nations that have essentially been sent to Egypt, not necessarily as hostages, but like kind of that is a possibility, sort of. Um, as well as there is apparently one indication that it could have been meant for children who were born on the same day as the crown prince. And that people who go to this COP tend to get higher official positions and are typically having positions that are very close to the pharaoh. So the person I always think of is a guy named Maher Pre, and he is an extremely interesting case because he was buried in the Valley of the Kings, which is meant for kings. And this guy genuinely doesn't even have that high of an official position. Like, is not a vizier, is not an architect, is not a priest, is not a high priest or anything like that. Pretty much as his extent, his titles are fan bearer at the right side of the king, which has been translated as a bodyguard sometimes or as a close advisor of the king. No matter what, it's somebody who appears to be like always at the right side of the king, like very, very close to it. And Maher Pre also had this child of the COP title. And so there's also a lot of indications that Maher Pre might have originally been from Nubia, based on some of his depictions in the Book of the Dead and how different he is depicted from other people. And so there's a possibility that he was like a Nubian prince or a Nubian child of a dignitary that is raised in the palace underneath this. And it's very odd because we can't 100% say that they are actually like fully educated and like literate and all that, but it definitely appears, sometimes it's been described as the nursery. So like it's not always a school in that way. But education seems very, very low. And people often are like, well, then why are they just writing Egyptian hieroglyphs everywhere if nobody can read it? It's all for the gods.
Yeah.
The vast majority of writing is all for the gods. The drawings are typically for the gods as well, but they are also meant more for the people as well. You can see that giant image of Ramses the Great rearing his mace back to strike down the enemies. You don't need to read the text to understand what's going on. And so it's a lot of these things are not necessarily meant for the people, and that they had essentially enough communication as it is, just by speaking, and that they didn't necessarily need all of the writing. Yeah, education's hard to pin down.
That is a little surprising almost for me, since Egypt seems associated with so much knowledge and learning and astronomy and math even. You think, where does that come from if there's such a low literacy rate? Mm-hmm. So is it just it's such a very high specialized group of people?
Yeah, it's a very high special group of people. There is also I can't remember the Egyptian name for it, but there is also essentially a royal library, palace of the library. So there's a special word for that is a place where those people would be working. But those are also probably the same people who are writing letters to other nations, and are like, they're all kind of doing that at the same time. The funny thing with astronomy is that the vast majority of the astronomy knowledge from ancient Egypt doesn't come from Egypt. It comes from influences like Greeks and Mesopotamians, and doesn't really appear until the Greek period. So like they knew about obviously the star Sirius, it's called Sopdet, and they tracked calendars based on it because the flood season would begin at the rising of the star Sopdet. But everything else that we sort of know about like their astronomy comes from the Greeks, who stole it from the Mesopotamians and then brought it to Egypt. And those appear in Ptolemaic temples like Dendera and Edfu. And those are temples that did not exist until the Greeks were ruling Egypt at that time.
Well, going back to the pharaohs, and they're potentially not even needing to read. One thing that strikes me is that a lot of rulers throughout history in different cultures, you get the impression that they're not necessarily the completely all-powerful, do whatever they want. There is some sort of internal structure, or they have to be deferential to certain groups of important aristocrats or certain people in the palace. Is that the case with the pharaohs? Because that's how they're kind of depicted in popular media, whether it's, going back and watching Prince of Egypt, which I did recently because the music is so amazing. But is that the case with those?
Yeah, so there was a decent governmental structure in Egypt, and then the other thing that the pharaohs really had to contend with was the priesthood. The priesthood, very often, this happens very frequently in Egyptian history, the priesthood becomes more powerful than the pharaohs. And that is from both the pharaohs and the local population making donations to the temple, essentially to then bless, to get the blessings of whatever that deity. And they also owned a lot of land. And they sometimes would own much more land than the pharaohs would. And so even though the king is seen as like a living god in a lot of ways, the high priest of Amun, let's say in the New Kingdom, is probably the second most powerful person in that nation. And so a lot of the waves that we see with ancient Egyptian history, with all of the different time periods, there are roughly about 13 time periods, and you have what we have considered the high periods, which are the kingdoms, old, middle, new kingdom, and then the low periods are intermediate periods, late period, and Ptolemaic is high in its own way, but in a different in a slightly different way. The ends of those kingdoms are frequently because the priesthood is getting too powerful, and they are more powerful than the pharaoh. And it's just one of those things that you have to the balance in a lot of different ways. But yeah, there were within the governmental structure, there were viziers, there were high officials who were, again, like working in this specialized library, who were probably people who were doing correspondence with other nations. And there's lots of different advisors that the king would have to, most of the time, try to listen to. And then in most time periods of ancient Egypt, there's also something called a nomarch. And a nomarch is somebody who is ruling over a nome, not nome with a G, nome with an N, which is essentially a state within ancient Egyptian history. And so there are a ton of states. And those nomarchs would then have to report back to the pharaoh. In some time periods, those nomarchs have risen up and become powerful. Most likely, these are in the intermediate periods where there's not one pharaoh ruling over all of Egypt. It's actually sometimes two different pharaohs ruling over north and south, and sometimes those are the nomarchs, and they get extremely powerful because they own a lot of the land in that area and are able to kind of have all that trade going through their area. There's a couple in Beni Hassan that become very powerful, and then a lot of them in the very south in Aswan and Elephantine at certain points get very powerful as well.
So that leads me to then the military structure. So the pharaoh is at times depicted in media as always being sort of at the front of the military, leading in battle. Is that the case as well, or is it more that there is sort of a professional class of generals? Is it conscription, or is it more of a professional class of soldier, like, say, ancient Greece?
Yeah, so for the most part, we can assume most pharaohs did not actually fight in battle. We have some exceptions. There is a lot of indication that probably Ramses the Great actually did go out there and fight. And then even before Ramses the Great, at the very beginning of the New Kingdom, we have at least one, if not two, pharaohs die in battle because they were ruling the south while there was another nation of peoples called the Hyksos people ruling in the north. And for the definite Senkenri Tao has a lot of battle wounds on his face, and there's a couple different theories about how he specifically died, but it has something to do with battle and with the conflict with them. And then his son also dies fairly quickly after that, and there's a high indication he may have died in battle as well. But for the most part, it is absolutely a show of force. It is a show of how powerful the pharaoh is. If you see Tutankhamun on a carriage throwing back his bow, he absolutely never did that. I could almost tell you that with accuracy. For one, there's not any big battles recorded when he was living and when he was pharaoh. He was also very young, and we know from his body that he had a lot of problems, that he had over 100 canes in his tomb. He probably could not have stood very nicely on the back of a carriage. And so Egyptian art is almost always idealistic. It is showing the best type of pharaoh. And it does depend on the time period. Like, it is the best thing that they considered at that time. So there are times that it doesn't look technically what we would consider their best. But for the most part, there's a lot of idealistic nature of their art. But yeah, the military, there are generals, and there are people that appear to be either conscripted or had a career as soldiers. There also is a lot of indication that they hired mercenaries from other countries, other nations, during certain time periods. Typically in the New Kingdom, there appears to be a lot of Nubian mercenaries that they would hire to be used in the military. But one of the very famous generals who became pharaoh is going to be Pharaoh Horemheb. Horemheb was a general under several pharaohs. Was, I think, four pharaohs. I think he was a general under four pharaohs, because this is at the very end of the Amarna period, and beginning of the 19th dynasty. I think he was we think he was a general, I think, under Amenhotep III, who was Akhenon's father, then Akhenon, then all of the weird pharaohs in there, but Tutankhamun, and then who takes over when Tutankhamun dies with no heir, and then dies with no heir. And so Horemheb had been a general at least through the Amarna period, and he takes power. And he becomes the pharaoh, and then he doesn't have any kids either, so then he actually adopts his another soldier. I don't know if he was a general at that time, but who becomes Ramses the First. And he becomes the first pharaoh of the 19th dynasty, but he was also a military, essentially a soldier of some sort. And so we don't have a lot of like specific names of generals, but there are a couple that have been recorded.
That's very interesting. So Ramses the First, pretty well known, was a soldier.
Yeah. He had because of the complications of the succession crisis that comes after Akhenaten, there's like 5 people that have no blood relation before Ramses the First. And Ramses the First, as it was, I think, was super old. So he did not live very long after that. And then he has Seti, who then has Ramses the Great, who is Ramses II. And so like Ramses the First rule was not that huge, but it was enough to kind of stem off a very long line of a strong genealogy, because we actually have they're almost all connected throughout the 19th and 20th dynasties.
Well, I want to ask something different, sort of selfish for me, because I'm writing a novel and I'm including a lot of sort of American Gods vibe. If you're familiar with that, that's what I've heard from people who've read my manuscript so far, and about a third of the way through. Includes a lot of sort of supernatural beings, not necessarily gods, but what kind of, say, I guess we might call them cryptids or supernatural beings. Like I'm including Jinn and various Oni and Tengu and I forget the name now, the one in Scotland, but you know what I mean, the Kelpies and things like that. Are there beings like that were sort of believed by the common person in Egypt?
Honestly, not really. There are some. Here's the interesting thing. So like Rima Gerbet says Amit. Amit is definitely, you can sort of consider her in there. There are a lot of beings that are not technically considered gods or goddesses, but that are definitely mythological. Amit is sort of a goddess, but in my opinion, if you don't worship her, I don't know if you are a goddess, if that makes sense. Like Amit is not necessarily worshipped because she is like literally the devourer of your heart, if your heart is seen as
perfect for Valentine's Day.
Yes, exactly. Perfect for Valentine's Day. If it is imbalanced with Ma'at, or which is truth and order, then Amit eats your heart. And Amit is a combination god where she has the face of a crocodile, the mane and front body of a lion, and the back of a hippo, which are pretty much the 3 most dangerous animals in ancient Egyptian history. And so Amit sort of falls into that. The other ones that I would say fall into that are essentially the demons that are in the afterlife. And I've done a decent amount of research on these, but they vary so wildly that we don't know a lot about them. Like they're essentially mentioned just once in the Book of the Dead. In one spell of the Book of the Dead, you have to pass by this demon, and they have crazy names and they have crazy epithets. But like that's it, because the Book of the Dead is essentially a cheat sheet for you to get into the afterlife. And if you know the name of the demon, you have control over them. So the Book of the Dead is just mentioning their name so that you know their name so you can pass by it in the afterlife. For mythical beasts, there are a couple options. There is something that really only appears in the pre-dynastic period. I think it also appears outside of Egypt as well. And it's something that it's like so stupid for, I can't say the word. It's very hard for me to say. It's sauropopards. It's a serpent leopard, I think is where that word comes from. You can see it on pre-dynastic palettes, and it has this really long neck, but it's not a giraffe. Like, that's the key thing. It looks like a giraffe, but it's not a giraffe because it has like sort of a serpent neck. But they only really appear in pre-dynastic palettes, and so we don't necessarily know if like normal people would sort of know them, like cryptids and like have the sort of lore. And there is also a creature that is named in the literature story, The Shipwrecked Sailor, which is a giant snake. And giant snakes are definitely something that like Egyptians would probably know about, because Apep, their ultimate kind of villain in all of mythology, is a giant snake that will attempt to eat the sun every single night. And that is something that probably at least a couple different like a few common people would may have known about. It's unclear how deeply religious a lot of the very lowest classes of Egyptian society were. And that they may have only really believed in a lot of these household deities, sort of as just like people that could protect them, rather than like actually believing in like that if they don't mummify themselves that they're not getting to the afterlife. Like, they probably did not believe in that a lot of the times because they didn't have access to it. But in The Shipwrecked Sailor, is a story, a fictional story about a shipwrecked sailor who ends up on an island and meets this giant serpent. And he gives him all of the riches on this island and tells this story about how he used to have this massive family of all these big giant serpents, and that something fell from the sky and killed them all. And then he ends up sending the shipwrecked sailor back to where he came from with all of these riches. But again, that is a story that I don't know how many people would have known about. It is a story that we have in a lot of different iterations, but it's still a literature story that's written down. So is that a story that would have been recited out to people? Unclear. Probably in some ways.
How many stories are there, and potentially about that very thing, that aren't preserved, that, you know, maybe it is really widespread? That's so hard to know. But yeah, that is cool, because that's a creature I might need to integrate. Yeah, I need more villains. I need some more villain supernatural creatures.
Apep's a really scary one. A lot of people have always said Set is sort of the main villain of Egyptian history, and he really is not. He definitely has done some bad things, but he is chaos while everything else is order. And the Egyptians had a very innate understanding that you needed both to survive, and that is why they always depict these battles between Set every year, because if one doesn't survive, then the other will take it over. And so Set has always been seen as a villain, and he's always using a villain in almost all popular media that includes Egypt. But he really is not. He's not that bad, especially because some pharaohs, you can tell that he is definitely not a full villain, because some pharaohs use him as their main deity, i.e. the Ramessides, because literally Seti is just Set. So Seti the first and Seti the second are literally named after the pharaoh, after this god. So they wouldn't have named a pharaoh their personal name after a god that they saw as a villain.
I see a reference to Jormungandr. I was thinking more like Sheogorath and Jigalag, but that's my nerdiness as, you know, Skyrim.
Yes.
But to bring it back to you, what since we've talked a lot about Egypt and history, let's talk about the present. What are you doing coming up? You were doing the interview series for last year. What do you have coming up in the near future?
So many things that it is extremely overwhelming. So on Twitch, yes, we are starting with season 4 of the Beyond Denial guest lecture series. That will start in March. It consists of 2 lectures a month. I will give 1 lecture a month about an ancient Egyptian topic, and then a guest of mine will give a lecture, or we do a discussion or a Q&A. It kind of just depends with the guest. And we do that from March to this year. We're going to end in September because that is our brand anniversary. And so my lecture will just be a celebration of our brand anniversary, because my life always gets so much busier in September to December. So that is starting up in March. Already have all my topics picked out. I'm very excited with some of the ones that I'm going to talk about, and I've been reaching out to lots of fun guests to get onto and share their knowledge. A lot of them are TKF members, and a lot of them are Twitch streamers. But I've also reached out to a lot of people on TikTok as well. So it'll be a nice mixture of people. I have also begun to start doing museum meetups. This is a new thing, and we're going to see how it goes because it's very complicated. Obviously, I have followers and friends from all over the country and all over the world. But we are doing 4 museum meetups once a month. I have at least scheduled right now. So this month, we will be meeting up at the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, Maryland. Next month, we will be meeting up at 3 different Smithsonian museums in Washington, D.C. In April, we will be going to the University of Pennsylvania's museum in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And then in May, we will be going to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, Virginia. All of these have Egyptology collections, mostly on display. Unfortunately, I found out that UPenn is doing a huge renovation of their Egyptian department, but they do have some Egyptian objects still on display in a different area. So we're still going to go there. We just have to go back eventually. And then I'm hoping to expand more. Again, we're mostly going to focus on the East Coast because that is where I am. But hopefully I will be able to expand out to some other big museums in the future. And then the really big news is that Melissa in Denial is hosting a trip to Egypt in 2027.
Fantastic.
It has been very overwhelming. I teased it last week and I am still working on finalizing it. But we are going to be traveling with a group called Travel Egypt Now, named from Abdel and Gina. Abdel is Egyptian. He grew up in the area of Abydos and he has a PhD in Egyptology. So we are absolutely going to trust that he is going to give us like the best tour ever. And Gina is his wife, who was an American who went to Egypt and fell in love with her tour guide and got married. So we're very excited. I was essentially able to customize a tour with them. It is going to be a 10-day tour in February 2027. Still finalizing any details. If you want to join us, I have an email list going, and I sent out an introduction email with some of the basics. So send me a DM, send me a whisper, and I will get your email on our email list. But yeah, that has been like a long-term goal that I can't even really believe it's going to happen. So I'm so excited and I want to start, hopefully, like we'll probably start doing it maybe once a year and then maybe in the future we can do it twice a year. And I want to get, this is going to be like kind of the basic tour of just Cairo and Luxor. But I really would love to start arranging tours to the off the tourist path. I would love to go to Amarna. I would love to go to some of these sites that are harder to get to and honestly were harder for me logistically to figure out to get to, but now I have Abdel who can speak Arabic and who knows tour companies and knows bus companies, and I'm just like, this is gonna be great. Like we're gonna be able to go to so many really obscure places that I've always wanted to go to, but I've been terrified to be able to like try to figure out how to get to this like very obscure part of Egypt. So it's actually crazy that it's going to happen.
Well, congratulations. That is going to be freaking awesome. Yeah. And if you are watching and you're interested, definitely reach out to Melissa. That sounds like it would be an amazing time. But since you brought up hearts and it brought me to Valentine's Day, I got to ask because yesterday, my most recent educational thing, I did a lesson on the myth of the love languages, sort of broke that down. Mm-hmm. That was my Valentine's Day special. Got to ask, since it is Valentine's Day, what was romance and dating or arrangement of marriages like for the average ancient Egyptian who was not going to be married to some other noble or royal?
It is very interesting because we can tell that there was love, that there were things like love. I actually might pull up some love poetry and I can read it out for you guys because I think it would be really cool.
Perfect for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I've done a couple. I did like a long time ago. I did a TikTok about love poetry in ancient Egypt. And I should have made one for today. And so you can tell you can tell that there is like love, and there is sort of things that people were attracted to each other, and that it appears that it wasn't necessarily like totally arranged marriages or sort of the things that we kind of typically think of, but they're also very vague. The big thing that you don't see in Egyptian art is you don't see intimacy. Like, intimacy is not a thing. Their closest that you can get is that couple statues will have like their arm like around you. Like, they'll have their arms around them. But you don't see depictions of kissing. You don't see depictions of anything further than that typically, unless it is like we call ostraca, which are essentially random sketches that somebody puts on like a random piece of limestone or a random piece of pottery. There you do see it, along with the what's that called, the Turin erotic papyri, which look if you dare, it's a little crazy. But again, very rare, like literally probably one of the only pieces that actually kind of has that. And the thing that's so, you do get certain aspects where like these things are sort of more prominent. The Amarna period, there's so much of Akhenaten and his wife and his daughters kissing and hugging and being in these very intimate family scenes. And it is mainly because that time period is so unique and so different that pharaohs can dictate what they want to be depicted. And so, hey, Akhenaten wanted that to be depicted, so he gets it depicted when a lot of people don't. Marriage is very weird in ancient Egypt. It does not appear that there was sort of anything special. There's no word for to get married. Really, the only word that they use is a word, gereg, which essentially really means to set up a house. And it appears that for somebody to get married, you just have to move in together. There does not appear to be any sort of big marriage ceremony. We can assume that pharaohs and like crown princes would have some sort of ceremony. But it appears for the lowly person, you just got to move in. And we do have evidence of kind of divorces and things like that as well on the other side of love. But it's something so personal that truly any sort of history, you can make a lot of assumptions based on the things that people left behind, but it's one of those things. It's like identity. It's like sexuality. It's like race. It's those things that like, how did somebody identify? How did somebody love? It's very, very hard to kind of pin down. You really need a lot. You really can only get it with like personal writings and things like that, which you don't really get with Egyptians as much. But I pulled up, what is this? This is a Metropolitan Museum of Publication. You can find it online. It's called Romance Along the Nile, Ancient Egyptian Love Poetry, by Neve Alon and Diana Craig Patch. And it's 19 pages of photos and small little love poetry. I will preface this with, some of this love poetry is going to sound weird because they are going to call each other brother and sister. Don't get your head out of the gutter. That was just a thing. Incest was just a thing that was done by the royalty, to keep it in, again, like keep the royal line in the family. Using the word brother and sister in this sense is showing the closeness of these people to each other. It is not literally meant to be about your brother or your sister. So that's why it's very difficult for me to find. When I made that video, I had to selectively pick certain poetry, because otherwise it wasn't carrying the right way. But this is a short one. How knowing is my beloved in tossing the lasso, but she draws no cattle. Her hair is the lasso she tosses at me. With her eyes she beckons me. With her finery she binds me. Her ring is her brand. I just love that one. That one's so sweet.
That is very lyrical. That is
Very lyrical, and a lot of the things that a lot of the comedy and like funniness of ancient Egyptian like goes away when you're not reading the actual Egyptian, because a lot of it is rhyming. Like they're using words that rhyme, but obviously when you're reading in English, you lose some of those things. So it also like it seems lyrical to us. It also could be the translation. We'll give it the fact if we start hearing any thous, it means that it's a really old translation and they're probably emphasizing that lyricalness. But yeah, it's there's a lot of interesting ones. This one is I pass by his house, finding its door open. My beloved stands beside his mother, his siblings all around him. He looks at me as I pass, but I alone rejoice. Had his mother known my heart, she would have gone inside for a moment. O golden one, put that in her heart, so that I may hurry to my beloved and kiss him before his companions. Those are both on the Papyrus Chester Beatty 1. But yeah, there's a lot of really nice poetry.
yeah, and just who knows who that was, and yet thousands of years later, their love for that person that we will never know of is recorded, and we still hear of it.
Exactly. Those ones are interesting because it's on a papyrus, and papyrus is extremely expensive. So like having something written on papyrus is something that like needs to be recorded. I would have to I now want to look at what else is on that papyrus if it's all just poetry, because then it's like are we recording all of the poetry that we have been hearing? Is that why we're doing this? But like this one is on this ostracon, and like an ostracon is in some ways an actual formal writing technique and a writing place, but it's always on like a broken piece of limestone, a broken piece of pottery. It's sort of reusing it. What it is, more than likely, it is a scribe using that as scratch paper, either to draw or to write. And if they are writing, a lot of times what they are using that for is somebody is speaking and you are recording it to practice your writing. And so a lot of the literature stories that I was talking about before, we can tell that this is a person practicing writing this story so that the story is potentially much older, but we only have this depiction of it from this time period because this student scribe is attempting to try and write on this. So those two ones like is interesting because they're coming from a papyrus, which is going to be automatically more expensive and automatically going to be something that is more likely kept in like a library or someplace. Like an ostraca, you can sort of practice it and then throw it away in a way. Think about it that way. So like this one is very different, and I think gives the potential that maybe somebody is just like writing on a whim. So this one is, the love of my beloved is there on the other side. The river swallows my body. Noon, or the flood, is strong this season, and a crocodile is waiting on the sandbank. Still I go down to the water, wading through the waves. The crocodile, I find, is like a mouse. The flood waters like land under my feet. It is her love that makes me strong, so she will cast a water spell for me, and I will see the one whom my heart loves standing right before me.
Oh,
isn't that
wow.
great?
That was
That's
great.
so good. Yeah, that's I think that's a popular one. I've heard that one because the other funny thing is that line, a crocodile waiting on the sandbank. That is there's a fiction story that's the title. It's by I always forget her name. It's by an Egyptologist named Barbara Mertz. Underneath her pen name, oh my God, what is her pen name? Gosh dang it, I always forget it. Elizabeth Peters. Underneath her pen name, Elizabeth Peters, she wrote a series called the Amelia Peabody series, which is about a woman named Amelia Peabody who is an archaeologist in the early 1900s. And literally there's a story that is called Crocodile on the Sandbank. And I've just put two and two together that I think that might be where that title comes from. because she was an Egyptologist, like graduated with a PhD and then moved to fiction writing because she couldn't get a job in Egyptology. So I could almost guarantee I think that might be where that comes from.
And this is just, and these are, if they're written on some kind of scrap paper, essentially, these aren't even the things that people are like, this is so good, I need to, record this for history. I mean, this is like the Gundam Wing fan fiction that I threw away on the class trip because if my teachers found my notebook, I would have gotten in trouble because it was,
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for the link.
There's
That's
the link,
very
everyone, if you guys want to read the book. It's a short
That's
little book. It's only 19. There are longer ones, I know. But this one at least has the actual sources of what, if you search like ancient Egyptian love poetry, you'll find a bajillion pages on the website on like the internet. But I only trust this one because it really has exactly what papyri it comes from. And then you can go search that and see what else they have in it. And also Neve
cool.
Alon, he wrote an amazing book of scribes in ancient Egypt. I actually met him because I did a book review on his book on scribes, and then my professor forced me to talk to him at a conference and then left me, and I didn't know what to say to him except, I read your book, it's really nice. And then I walked away, and she was really mad at me, but I was like, I don't know what else to say to him. I apologize. You just forced me into a conversation with somebody that I didn't know. But he's a very good expert in scribes and Scrabble palettes and lots of stuff.
Yeah. Well, since that really covers my Valentine's Day question, and that's the perfect sort of cap to it. Wow, that was fantastic. So I want to make sure that we get links to all of your content posted in our chat here. So make sure that you are, if you're watching on the TKF channel, make sure that you are following Melissa in Denial on Twitch, on YouTube. Check out her TikTok and all the other links that she has there. So we'll make sure that we get links posted there. If you are a viewer and you are doing any kind of educational content and interested in being on streams like this, let us know, because Melissa in Denial interviews educational content creators, and we interview educational content creators here on the Knowledge Fellowship channel. You can also join the Knowledge Fellowship Discord, whether you are a streamer or just a viewer. If you are interested in being a part of this group, you are welcome to join. You can apply and we can get you added. Check out your content and see if we can help you out with that. I am looking for future guests as well myself for this very series. We'll be interviewing actual education in the coming months. I am always interested in especially highlighting new streamers, people who are just getting started, giving them a platform, giving them a way to get a spotlight for what they're doing. You can follow me at Mr_Aegis on Twitch and on YouTube. I give health and wellness lessons. I'm a health teacher in the real world. I stream things about mental health, physical and mental well-being. We did our love language lesson yesterday. We've done, we recently did a charity drive for blood donation. January was National Blood Donation Month. So things like that. But most importantly, though, is that you had a good time and that you learned a little bit about ancient Egypt and all kinds of other great stuff that we talked about today in a wide-ranging conversation, which is kind of exactly what I was hoping to have. I know it wasn't as structured, but you have such a wide, ancient Egypt, it's such a huge topic. There's so much to talk about. And this is my favorite format to do. We've had, formal presentation styles. We've had this more free-ranging sort of late-night talk show style, which I really enjoy. I still need to get a mug with a caricature of my face on it, like a late-night TV host, so that I can...
You do. Absolutely, you do. What I'm trying to do is get this. That's the link. That's the link to everything.
There we go. Yes. Check out her card there. That'll get you all the links that
literally, and it literally is all the links. Somebody has said that is the most links they've ever seen on a link, and I'm just like, I can't help it. There's just a lot of things I do, and a lot of things need to be on there. So, but yeah, thank you so much for having me. Absolutely. I feel like I've been part of the TKF almost pretty much as long as I've been streaming. So, I was always so happy to work with so many amazing people, and I've had so many TKF people as guests on my stream, and looking forward to have more.
Yeah, and I am looking forward to it as well, and looking forward to seeing your next upcoming guests. And speaking of TKF, I will be taking us on our little field trip, as I would call it in my channel. Let's see who in TKF is currently up and streaming right here. Let's see where we got RWX Rob. That's where we're headed, folks. Thank you so much for being here. Everyone who was viewing, everyone who supports TKF, we really appreciate it. Always happy to be able to support substantive educational content as a counter to, unfortunately, all of the slop that's out there. You can watch something that is going to enrich you, entertain you. So support that kind of content. Thank you so much. We will be heading out on our raid. We will see you all next time. That's all I have for you. Class dismissed.
I'm gonna stick around on my channel, but then we will follow you guys shortly.
Go check. Well, that's where go check out Melissa Denial. Go check out RWX Rob, the Knowledge Fellowship. That's all I got for you. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.